There is nobody that is you, and that is your superpower. I'm telling you, it is a superpower. It is where the beginning and the end of your wealth lies. This is what God is trying to tell us, to teach us all the time, is that we are important. We are special. We are the ones that we should be looking at with awe and with glory. God is within us. God sits within us. So next time you fall in love with a person, next time you put somebody else on a pedestal, next time you wonder how they did it, just understand that they were focusing on themselves. They love themselves. They put their energy and their love into themselves. And when I say self, this is the soul. This is the soul, not the egoic identity, because that is always sure to fall off. The mask always falls off. The facade always falls off. And ultimately, like, it is us in the end that suffers and struggles when we don't know who we are. Like, nobody else suffers and struggles. And if we want, we can keep pretending to be a certain way and to have a certain identity, but we're not happy. It's our happiness that is being sacrificed at the end of the day. So please try to sit with yourself, to know yourself enough to begin to love yourself, because that is what true self-love is. True self-love is self-knowledge. It's self-understanding. And again, when I say self with a capital S. So the self that is the soul, the self that loves God, the self that sits with God. That is who we should be looking at all times, past the ego, past the conscious mind, past the subconscious mind, into the soul. So how do we understand our soul? We can understand our soul when we sit within meditation and when we sit within prayer. The mind has to be quiet in order for the soul to come online. And the soul is extremely beautiful, radiant, colorful, magical, expansive, creative in its potency, powerful, original, holy. Like, these are the qualities of the soul, because the soul is actually always directly connected to God via this spiritual umbilical cord. That's how we are able to have animation, life. Because God is constantly powering our heartbeat through his infinitesimal energy. Our soul is within our bodies. Our soul is what allows for our heartbeat to keep going. So our soul is extremely important. And, when we nourish our soul through prayer, through devotion, through love of God, which is also known as bhakti, then something amazing happens wherein we understand that we can transcend the identity. We can transcend who we think that we are. We can transcend the ego, the false ego. We can transcend all the limitations we've put upon ourselves to be a certain way, all of our past history, even the body that we've taken, right? In its weight, size, and gender. We can transcend all of these things, and we can see ourselves clearly for who we are, as pure infinitesimal energy, as love, unconditional love. See, the soul is so expansive that it knows things. It knows things from past lives. It knows things from other planets. It knows things. That's why everybody has the ability to have gifts, spiritual gifts. Everybody is psychic. Everybody is a healer. It's just that we don't know it yet. So a lot of the times people, because they don't know who they are, they will hurt themselves intentionally, and they'll hurt others as well. Because they're lost, they don't know who they are. So this is how you get like narcissists. This is how you get people who even fall into the trap of envy, or fall into the trap of greed or anger, or any of these emotions that are self-harming, that are harmful to the self. We feed into that because, we're lost. People get so lost. They don't know that they're the soul. They don't know that they're pure, that they're automatically forgiven for everything that they think that they need to be forgiven for. They don't know that they are actually not guilty. They don't know that they are perfect in their action and thought. Like, this is what God is trying to relate to us in every single religious or spiritual text. God is trying to tell us, hey, human being, let me tell you the recipe to you. The recipe to you is that you are my child. I am your protector. You have the same qualities that I do. It's just that you're in contact with matter, so you have to live out some karma here. But in the end, you come back to me. You come home to me. The point of human material life is to realize me, God, so that you can come home to me. That's what God is trying to tell us. And so If one lives like an animal, if one eats like an animal, if one sleeps like an animal, and if one is a slave to their lower chakras or their basal senses, right? And they don't have the ability to sit in the higher up chakras, they don't have the ability to understand spirituality, then what happens is they will just incur the same reactions from their current actions. So if you live like an animal, if you exist like one, you're going to continue to need to feed those senses. But if you don't, and if you can transcend your senses to some degree, this is why we practice fasting, we practice celibacy, we practice restraint of the senses. This is what yoga is. Yoga is restraint. Because when you can transcend the senses and you're no longer a slave to them, something happens wherein the kundalini energy, which is the energy that needs to be awakened for soul recognition to take place, the kundalini energy actually has the chance to rise up the base of the spine. Essentially, the higher chakras come online. We don't need to know all the intricacies as to how this happens. If you want to, you can look it up. But it is only when we can restrict or restrain the sense objects, right? Such as sights, sound, hearing, tasting, all these things, that we actually can see the soul or recognize the soul. And it's actually like made apparent to us, you know? So that's why we practice fasting and celibacy and all of these things, because we don't want to live like animals, because we don't want to take another birth. We don't want to come back. Like, do you understand? The human form of life is very difficult. We go through hell here. Like, earth is a middle plane, so it can either be heaven or hell depending on where you sit spiritually, where your consciousness is sitting. So for some people, it is a form of hell, and I can attest to this. At some point in my life, earth was hell, life was hell. And that is what catapulted me into my spiritual journey, because things got so dark that I had no choice but to seek God. And, we only really seek God or seek answers or want change when we get mad uncomfortable, because it is when we are uncomfortable that we actually want to create change for ourselves. But if you're suffering just enough, if you have just enough suffering such that you're not actually like willing to do anything about it, that's a really dangerous place, because then you can just get stuck there. So you have to not be okay with any amount of suffering. You have to just not be okay with any amount of suffering. You're depressed, you're sad, that's not normal, that's not okay. Figure out why. You have to love yourself enough to figure out why, so that you can get to the root cause of your problems, even if that means sitting within meditation for hours, right? Get to the root cause about your problems, see where it comes from, and seek to heal yourself at the root of these problems. And that'll always be spiritual healing. Like everything else, because there's so much information out there surrounding therapy and mental health and everything like that, and all that stuff is great, but ultimately the soul wants recognition. The soul is literally begging us, pay attention to me, feed me with comfort and peace. The soul wants peace. So you can do all the CBT therapy in the world, but you have to allow for it to hit your soul. You have to understand that everything is spiritual. Everything is here to aid you in your ascension process. The point of human life is to realize God. Animals cannot do this, okay? Human beings are the only species. There are 8.4 billion species of life on Earth, and human beings are the only species who can do this. And human beings are the only species who, at the time of death, can fix the life breath between the eyebrows, remember God, and go back. Because wherever we seek to go at the time of death, we will end up there. Meaning, wherever our consciousness is sitting at the time of death, we will end up there. Meaning, whatever we remember at the time of death, that is where we're going to go. And so if you are dying, and if you are remembering your dog when you were like a child, and you're like thinking of your dog for some reason, and like that is where you are focused, that is where you're going to go. You may incur another life as a human being with a dog. You may become a dog. Like, you don't know what karma can bring to you. So it's best to remember God. Remember the image of God. Remember God's energy. Focus on images of God. And it doesn't matter what name you want to give God. It doesn't really matter what religion you are, as long as you know in your heart and in your soul that you have a connection to God. Stay there, be there, and remain fixed in that, and don't let anything or anybody or any experience in your life shake you from that. And at the time of death, remember God and go back. This is the point of human life. This is the best information anybody can give you. Also, remember that you're being cared for at all times by this source. Peace.